thanks very much, Anthony, for doing this session for us today. This is the first of the new year, and it's a cold and windy Edinburgh. I don't know, where's it you're based?
Just near Manchester, and yeah, it's pretty cold and
Okay.
windy here too.
Okay, right, great. And thanks to everyone for joining us today, to Doug, Jacqueline, and Tammy. And we are expecting some others, so hopefully that will be good. And of course, as always, we always record and archive the webinars. So it's great to have Antony here today. I hadn't actually heard of FindMyFlow. It was in November. I was at a conference, and I think it was one of your colleagues, Matt, was sort of demonstrating it, and I thought, well, that looks quite good. Um, so you're just going to take us through the software today, are you, Antony?
Yes, indeed. If that's okay, yeah, I'll run through some of the reasons and the rationale behind the solution, how it fits into learners sort of benefiting from their assistive technology, and how they can integrate that into their studies.
Okay, great. So that should be about 20 minutes, and then we'll have some, if there's any questions at the end, we'll take some questions. Okay, so I'll just shift over, and you can share your desktop. Is that okay, Antony?
Yeah, of course. I'll just click on that now. Share my screen. Desktop. Share.
Great, that looks great, thanks.
So just to confirm, hopefully you should be able to see my browser at the moment, and says at the top of the screen, select your assistive technology. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can see your screen nice and clear, yeah.
Perfect, great stuff. Okay, what I'll do just by way of a quick introduction is to explain where the product really originated from and why it's been developed. So what we're finding is more and more students and learners are looking to get support on their assistive technology outside of core 9 to 5, Monday to Friday hours. And we're sort of in a generation now where a lot of people are researching their solutions on the internet and require help. 3 o'clock in the morning for a dissertation, or Saturday afternoon when they're doing a bit of revision, whatever it may be. And when people have the free time to enable themselves to do that, it's also a question of there's a lot of great information out there about what pieces of assistive technology do, but not necessarily why you would want to do them, the study skills around that. And some of it is very intuitive, some of it is very obvious once you've been told. So that's why FindMyFlow was developed. So what I'll do is I'll run through the selection screen at the front, and then we'll go into the product and start looking to see how that helps. So hopefully you can see on the screen in front of you there are a number of products which are grayed out, and there's just a couple more as we scroll slightly further down the screen there. So what somebody would normally do is to go click on each of the items that they have been supplied with in terms of assistive technology. So just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to select Audio Notetaker, Dragon speaking, inspiration from mind mapping solution, go for ZenPal, and just by way of demonstration, I'm going to select Read and Write. But actually, I've changed my mind. What I want to do is actually include Claro as well. Now, the software is very deliberately designed that you cannot select multiple products that fall into the same category, so you couldn't select 2 mind mapping solutions. And I'll show you why in a minute, because it would confuse the flows, and generally people don't have 2 mind mapping solutions or 2 text-to-speech solutions. So all I need to do is just unclick Read and Write and click Claro Read instead. I'm just going to click Continue in there now. And that starts to tailor the flows to bring together the resources from each of those products. And what we'll see in a moment is the landing page, which it basically is the basis for all the learning that hopefully people will conduct. Some lovely wavy, friendly figures on the screen at the moment, so they'll disappear in a second. Let's get started. So there's a fair bit of information on the screen in front of you at the moment, and I'll just run through those bits to give you an idea of where we are. So first of all, I'm just going to highlight this box on the right-hand side, which is obviously entitled My Software, and it lists the software that has been selected at this stage. And I can just click on any one of those, and it tells me, okay, that's for using MindMap to brainstorm ideas and structure thoughts. So it just gives me a quick overview of what each of those products are. So it may well be that these have been recommended as part of, say, a disabled students allowance recommendation. And of course, the assessment would have been several weeks ago, and people are now coming back to this fresh. So Audio Notetaker allows you to keep your sound files, select your slides and notes. I'll just close that, but it just gives a brief overview of what each of the pieces of the software do. The main area that we sort of focus on as part of the product are these 5 key areas in the middle, which is lectures, reading and research, essay writing, revision, and presentations. And the reason we sort of come at it from this angle is that we do have students as part of our training who come to us and say, I don't know how to do this and read and write. We probably have more students who would come to us and say, what I really want is an audio file of all of my work. How do I do that? Or I'm struggling with research. How do I, best use my technology to do that? Or, lecture notes, whatever that may be. So instead of coming at it from this is what Dragon Naturally Speaking does, we come at it from what are you trying to achieve? And that seems to really sort of work with a lot of our learners. The bars in the middle there I'm going to come back to because they'll get populated as we go on through the demonstration. And we come down to mastery level. So as you work your way through the flows and you learn more about it, your mastery level goes up. I think it goes up to about nine levels before you become a master. But some people like to obviously see their progression through and how they're getting on. And my study priorities, as you're working through, if it's either something that you find you need to focus on, or if you're working in conjunction with a one-to-one trainer or a tutor, you can set your study priorities in there, and we'll link back into those in a second. So what I'm going to do is just look at one of our 5 sort of key flows at the top to start off with. And I'm going to go into essay writing, as that's a fairly popular one. So the first sort of thing that we like to point out is the flow summary. So this is where it tells you, basically, obviously, we're going to get started. We're going to start looking at creating an essay plan. We're going to look at different academic styles, writing your essay, etc., and how that's referenced, how you format it, your word count. And these are all sort of brought together using these 3 products at the bottom. So what we've done is said, right, these are the 3 pieces of assistive technology you've got that would be great in helping you to work on essay writing. So we've got, again, we can click on that, inspiration, Dragon Naturally Speaking, and Claro Read, and we'll look at how those 3 products can support you in all of these aspects. So I'm just going to click into, say, writing your essay. And use your assistive technology to find a writing technique that works for you. We're going to click into that. So there are a number of shortcuts down the left-hand side here, and basically this is now the flow of how we're going to learn how to use our assistive technology, learn more about how to write an essay. And the first thing I'm just going to point out is I can favourite that just at the top there, and that will come up in our favourites bar on the home page in a second because this is something we really want to focus on. As is, we're just going to look over here. So writing your essay over on the left-hand side of the screen. So we could use inspiration, for example, to look at how you compose an essay, how you use the mind mapping software to rapid fire to get your ideas down, how to structure them. We can look at Dragon and how you can dictate into your word processing package and start sort of getting your ideas down on paper. Checking and correcting with Dragon, coming down through Dragon General Tips, through to how to use Claro Read, writing with prediction, and configuring the predict feature so that those are all functions that can be brought in from these pieces of software to support you with what you're trying to achieve, which is writing an essay. I'm just going to go into the first one again there for a moment. So about just gives you an overview of what it is. We're trying to compose an essay, and we're going to develop a first draft of your work in inspiration. Again, we can favourite that because that's a key thing for me. I do struggle to produce that first draft. We've got the transcript. So if we go into the at the top, I don't know whether you'll be able to hear the audio. So basically what we've got at the top there is the video moving you through a demonstration of the software and the tips and tricks for using that. And below we've got the transcript, which you can, using the accessibility features, for anybody with visual impairment or need on that side of things, we can change it to high definition of yellow and blue, for example, or we can choose one of the Erlen overlay colors just to change the background text on that. So should be hopefully sort of quite accessible to those with visual impairments and with text impairments. And most usefully, you can also download a handout if you just some people benefit from a printout that they can adapt to and write notes off and work on it that way. So there's a lot of accessibility and a lot of options in there for how to access the resources. And as I mentioned, we just started that, so we've added that to our favourites as well. As I mentioned at the start of this, one of the key things about how FindMyFlow works is it's not just about this is training you to use inspiration, for example, and the features of inspiration, but it's teaching you the study skills of why you would use inspiration, or something like Audio Notetaker. So little tricks like if you're using Audio Notetaker to record a lecture so that you can take your notes later, it'll give you hints like, try and get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation prior to the lecture so that you can download that, and then you can tag your audio recording to the PowerPoint so that you've got all that audio lined up, and that makes things much easier on the back end. Other things could be working with spell checking software. A lot of people are very easily distracted, including me, when I'm writing into a text field and I start getting squiggly lines everywhere. So I'm getting distracted from producing the text, and I'm concentrating on correcting all the squiggly lines and wondering whether this is that. And that really distracts learners from that writing process. So anything we can do to remove those distractions during the writing process, and then coming back to it afterwards to then do the corrections and change the grammar and the spelling and anything else that is felt necessary. The sort of study skills that are all built into this, that some are obvious, some not so obvious, and some that have been sort of garnered through many years of teaching experience. I'm just going to go over to the notes section. So over on the left-hand side, again, if you are this is something that you feel you need to focus on, or this is a particular challenge that you're working on, or if you're working with a trainer who is helping you through these things and he set you a couple of tasks, you can add that to the notes section, and then it stays with and you can just add little notes to yourself. You click out of that, and that should save that note in there for us. So just going back to the flow. So what I'm going to do is just take us back to the homepage. So as mentioned, we do have the favorites there in the middle. So just coming back to this aspect, you can click back into the favorites, and it starts to tell me what my favorites were and any subsections of that I've also starred. So we can go back into those along with any notes that are attached to them. So there is always that continuity, that ease of returning, because sort of repetition often obviously helps with the learning process. Resume last session. So if you've been working on something at college, you've come back home, you've logged back in. There's everything's based on the internet rather than on your computer. You could be doing this on your college computer and then come back and work on your home computer or on your laptop instead of your desktop, and you can resume the last session. So again, it takes us back to where we were on the previous learning strategy that we were looking at. And study priorities. So as mentioned, if these are things that you're working with a trainer or you're working independently, you're working with a tutor, that's one of my key things when I was in university was always revision. I was a nightmare at revision. So what I want to do is get organised. My revision timetable I always fall over on, and taking the exam. So those are the sort of things that are my study priorities, and these change throughout the course of the year. And I think that's something that also an e-learning solution like this has over one-to-one training. Never replace one-to-one training. That is always the most highly recommended one. But in terms of a student's needs across the course of a year, at the start of the year, certainly for a lot of people we talk to, note-taking is their priority, because that's not necessarily the same as they were doing at A-level, and their needs change. After Christmas, they might be getting to their first exam of the year, so they need to sort of jet up on their revisions, or they might be given a presentation to do, so that becomes a primary focus. And these things change over the course of the year. Like I say, for me, sort of revision was always my nightmare. And this is something that you can then set as the year goes on, and you can add and remove these. So I can take that back off if that's no longer a priority, and I'm now sort of need to think about presentations. And I can just go into those and change those at any time. And those, when you log on first, you get a little reminder of, oh yeah, that's what I need to focus on. Just going to take us over to the left-hand side of the screen now briefly. So as mentioned, we've got the 5 flows, and that's just an additional link depending on how people like to interact, so they can go back into the same places we were in just then. Tutorials by software. So as mentioned at the start of this, some people have a particular focus they want to concentrate on, like revision. Other people have a copy of Audio Notetaker, and they just really want to know everything they can know about Audio Notetaker and how that can be used. So you could go into Audio Notetaker, and you have initially the Essentials modules. So these are how to go in and the real sort of the key things you need to learn right at the very start. And those Essentials modules, they're all about sort of minute and a half long, but they give you all the key learnings you need to use that product. Alternatively, you can click into the Flow strategies, and this will give you all of the strategies and study skills around using Sonocent, for example. And that's true of all of our key products there at the moment. I'm just going to second. I'm just going to pop into inspiration, essentials, and there we go. And again, you know, wherever it is, you can add those. And again, you've got the transcripts and the handouts on all of these, so you can get them printed out and you can follow those through. Just going to go back to that. And that really does cover off most of the core functionality of the product. In addition to that, we do have some additional bits and pieces over on the left-hand side. We do have the favorite section, so we can use those. We have a reflective journal, which can be very key to some learners. We find that nursing students particularly appreciate using the reflective journals, and you know, you obviously you learn from your experience, and you know, what did you do well, what could you do better next time, what are the things we need to focus on. So you can work your way through the reflective journal and add your skills in there. We also have the study tools. So some people find these really obvious, other people find them really useful. But for example, an essay calculator. So I've got to write 3,000 words and just export that. So I need to do 100 words on the introduction. They recommend 4 lots of 200 words for the essay body and a conclusion of 100 words. And if you want to, you can then export that as a mind map. So that will export it as whichever mind mapping tool you've selected, for example, inspiration. So you can put that inspiration, you can then play with that essay calculator and start fleshing out what each of those parts of the essay body is going to require. So there's a few sort of things built in there like that. In addition, for disabled students allowance students, we do also provide a year's free license for mindfulness, which is for Karma, which is a mindfulness app, and assists people with sort of coping with stress and anxiety and the difficulties that a lot of us experience when sort of dealing with these difficult situations. We also build in some of the free resources. So, for example, things like Google Calendar are included, which most people already have. Zotero is a free download. So it's not just about the software that's been purchased either for the student or on their behalf, but also additional bits that people can log into and use. That kind of takes care really of most of the demonstration. I'll just take that back to the home screen, and at that point, I would ask: are there any questions on how this is set up and how it could benefit either yourselves or people you know?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'll just pop over to the front page so we can see if there's any questions. But the thing that strikes me, it's quite a sort of, I like the methodology. It's a sort of a one-shop approach to, sort of having everything in one place, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think certainly we've for example, if you looked at text helps training resources, and they are very, very good, but needless to say, they only talk about text help, and something like FindMyFlow will not just sort of focus on one product, but all of the products that you may have that could help you to achieve a certain source and how they work in conjunction with each other through inputting the text through to then sort of splitting up an essay or splitting up your revision. And how you can sort of build on that and sort of look after your research, etc. So yeah, it does bring together the full suite of products that you're working with.
Yeah, and I originally thought when I saw the demo of it back in November that it was kind of geared towards obviously further education, higher education, disabled students allowance, that kind of market, but. On reflection, it would be very good for pupils who may be transitioning from school into, FE or ITCHE to kind of, somehow, obviously they don't know what kind of software they might be needing, but just to get a sort of a head start on for the transitioning that they're going to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's very key, and we've been quite careful with the. I'll confess in my sort of presentation that I probably wasn't as careful with my language as we are sort of in the software itself. But yeah, we do try and sort of keep it as generic to learners in general than necessarily sort of focusing on what a university student might be doing. And what we also do for higher education establishments, a lot of them, instead of purchasing for individuals, will buy a site license. So they may have a site license for inspiration, for example, and we can tailor the site licenses for FindMyFlow so that students can log on and get the benefits from that without distracting from other products they don't have.
Okay, I'll just pop over back to the chat. Just out of interest, if you've someone who's using it who doesn't have a DSA, how much is it to purchase?
It's £140.
£140, and is that perpetuity? Is it for forever sort of thing, or is
That's a six-year license. That is.
Okay. And what happens if there's something that I've been recommended or I'm using, or I need to learn how to use, and the software isn't on FindMyFlow?
That's a very good question. We do have a development schedule which we're working through at the moment to add additional software, so things like Kurzweil, and there's some other bits and pieces we're adding at the moment, sort of spell checking solutions. If there are any titles that aren't in there at the moment, then we would just ask you to let us know. And basically, we're working on a demand basis to add those to it. So the more people tell us they want a particular product, the more it goes up the development schedule and goes on the system.
Yeah, there's so much, isn't it? It's difficult to keep abreast of, and then all the changes that go on as well. So Deb, Duke, Jacqueline, and Tammy, now's your chance to ask any questions. So that was really interesting. Thanks, Antony. I know,
No problem,
for example, works in further education, so he might have an FE type question. And if Jacqueline or Tammy or Deb have any questions, feel free just to type into the box. Higher level students. Yeah, I think he's got quite a good point there, Antony, doesn't it? You'd have to have quite a sort of, I think you'd have to be quite focused on what you're doing, wouldn't you? I mean, I know FindMyFlow is designed to do that, but you'd have to really want to go to work through it. I think. Do you think that's so?
I think our experience has been sort of twofold, really. That we found that students who've been provided with a range of assistive technology, in the first instance, a lot of the reaction is, well, I've taught myself how to use a computer, how to use my tablet, how to use my phone. I've done all that myself, and I've used YouTube to do it, or through friends, etc. And we definitely live in a generation where a lot of students are self-taught or taught through friends or YouTube. So we either find people are immediately engaging with it and they go, right, okay, brilliant, this is exactly what I wanted, I'm going to dive straight in. Or we find sort of, latterly down the line when people then start bouncing off the borders of their skills that they've acquired to date. And they start going, oh, actually, no, I really am, struggling with revision. That's not something to this degree that I'm used to when I'm suddenly studying it, degree level for 6 subjects and I've got 18 exams, and then they return to the product and then start looking at how that can support them through the AT that they've got. We find all sort of circumstances will drive interaction, but we do find that the out of hours support is probably one of the key ones, purely because it's 24/7 support. So quite often people have had one-to-one training on a mind mapping solution, but they get to 3 in the morning when they're trying to write an essay, and suddenly it's like, oh no, what do I do? Yeah. And that's when they're sort of logging in, and we see quite a lot of that activity.
How old is FindMyFlow then? How long has it been on the go for?
That's a very good question. So originally, FindMyFlow was launched under a different name probably about 7 years ago, but was completely reinvented to an online solution about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we're on to the second full iteration of it. In that time, this version was released about 12 months ago, and we sort of went through a bit of a minor rebrand, but there were a lot of sort of lessons learned from the first e-learning version of it, which have all been incorporated, and we work with trainers and study skills tutors to enhance it on each iteration.
Yeah, it looks good. It's nice and engaging. The reason I asked was, did you have any sort of research to sort of any evidence to show, that students have benefit from it? Any sort of impact at all? Anything like that?
Oh, we're actually in the process of compiling all of that at the moment. We didn't build in the metrics to do that with the previous version, which was an oversight. So the previous version was sort of, a lot of the development was based and driven by user feedback that we were canvassing via email. But this version has got a lot more sort of user metrics, so we're seeing how long people are, sticking with the video, sticking with a particular subject, how often they're clicking into and out of pages, and whether it was relevant to them.
Yeah.
Certainly with things like activity levels, yes, we've got all that, and user levels. So, evaluating how many people actually use it. It's all very well to give people this, but if they don't actually sort of open it and start using it, then it's a bit of a wasted resource. We're seeing depending on what they've got. If they've got an AT trainer, we're seeing around about 75 to 80% take up right from the get-go of sort of receiving the AT and FindMyFlow. If people aren't receiving AT training, they haven't had somebody to sort of guide them into this, then we're probably seeing initially around about 40-45%, but then within about 8 weeks, that's jumping up to the same sort of levels.
Okay, thanks. So just one last chance for anyone to ask any questions. As I mentioned earlier, the session's recorded and archived, and it'll probably be available tomorrow or the day after. So if you think anyone who'd benefit from FindMyFlow, there's the URL to visit, so they can have a quick look at the archive. No, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for attending today, and thanks to Antony for such a interesting presentation on FindMyFlow. Thank you very much. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you for everybody for attending.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks now. Bye bye.